In this tutorial, we'll take a closer look at brushes in Illustrator. You're currently viewing artwork that uses commercially available brushes. The versatility and flexibility brushes offer in general is pretty amazing. We'll get started with an overview of the various brush types. Then we'll turn our focus to creating several different kinds. And so you can use your own brushes in other Illustrator documents, we'll explore how to create a custom brush library. Lastly, there's a demonstration of how to install brushes you may have downloaded or purchased. If you haven't yet discovered the brush libraries in Illustrator, head to the Window menu and all the way down at the bottom, select Brush Libraries. Here, you're presented with a pretty decent amount of brushes that are included with the app. Be sure to check them all out. There might just be a brush or two that's suitable for your next project. There are several brush types in Illustrator, and we'll start with the most basic variety, which are calligraphic brushes. You can find these by opening the Artistic menu from the Brush Libraries menu, and then selecting Artistic Calligraphic. To see them in action, you first need to create a path to apply them to. This can be a shape, such as a circle, or you can draw a path with the pencil tool, the paintbrush tool, or the pen tool. Select your path, and then select a brush from the panel. Calligraphic brushes mimic the style of lines you would draw with a real-world calligraphic pen. There's typically a variance in the thickness of a line along the path. The second type of brush is a scatter brush. It varies visual elements in random ways along a path from rotation of the visual to how far apart the next one appears. From the Brush Libraries menu, open the Decorative menu and select Decorative Scatter. Apply some of these to a selected path. It's easy to create this type of brush. First, create some artwork. When done creating, select the artwork and drag it onto the Brushes panel, which you can access from the Windows menu. Illustrator will prompt you to specify the brush type. Choose Scatter and click OK. Options for your scatter brush will appear. You can accept the name Illustrator provides for the brush, or you can come up with your own. Initially, you only have access to the controls on the left of the panel. However, for that more random look, change the options from fixed to random. Next, adjust the slider controls to create variance in the brush. The size control will make the stars I created both large and small along a path. Spacing determines how close the visuals will appear to one another. Scatter adjusts the visual's position along a path, and rotation will, as the name implies, rotate the visual. To see how this looks on a path, we'll click OK and apply the brush to a path. We can then make adjustments to the brush controls if need be. To re-edit a path, double-click it on the Brushes panel. You get the same scatter brush controls as earlier, but now there's a preview option. Selecting that and modifying the controls will then be reflected on the applied brush. When you're satisfied with the brush options, click OK. If you have the brush applied to a path, Illustrator will ask whether you want to apply the changes you've made to that path or whether you want to leave it as is. In virtually every situation, you'll choose Apply to Strokes. Scatter brushes do a lot of work for you. They randomize graphics in a way that would otherwise require a lot of time and effort. The next type of brush to look at are art brushes. These are one of two types that are most commonly used. Art brushes stretch the visuals along the entire length of a path. If you have any brush panel open, access the brush libraries by clicking on the library icon in the lower left. This is a little easier and faster than going to the Window menu again. Choose Arrows Special from the Arrow menu. It's just as easy to create an art brush as it is to create a scatter brush. Create some artwork, select it, and then drag it onto the brushes panel. I like the existing brush, but I want to update the colors. To do this, I select the brush from the panel and drag it into my document. To edit, I double-click the artwork. This takes me into an isolation mode where I can select and modify the individual objects. When I'm finished editing, I'll exit the isolation mode by clicking an empty area of the gray bar along the top of the document. I then drag the updated artwork onto the brushes panel, where I'll then choose Art Brush when prompted. The settings here are a bit different than those you saw for scatter brushes. Since I want to see how these controls affect my brush, I'm going to simply name the brush, click OK, then apply it to a path. With that selected, I'll double-click the brush on the panel to bring up the options again. I'll enable Preview. The main settings I'll focus on concern how the visual element scales on a path. Scale proportionally will vary the size of the visual depending on the length of a path. Stretch to fit stroke length is the default option. As mentioned earlier, this will stretch the visual along the entire length of a path. The Stretch Between Guides option will only stretch the part of the path that's between the guides you can adjust. Other settings control the direction of the visuals along a path. When you're done editing options, click OK. The next type of brush, also another one that's commonly used, are pattern brushes. This type of brush repeats a visual element along a path. Find examples of these by opening the Brush Libraries menu and choosing Borders Geometric from the Borders menu. Pattern brushes are kind of like tiles that follow a path you draw. In the settings, tiles make up the anatomy of a pattern brush. The 5 tile options define the various parts of it. The 2 tiles on the right give you control over the start and end of an open path, such as a line. They aren't required unless you want that level of control. If you have a closed shape, such as a square or a circle, you won't see these. On the left are the 3 tiles that make up a standard pattern brush. You can define an inner corner tile, a side tile, which is the most common and is really the only one required, and an outer corner tile. You can use the options that appear in the menus for each tile. Some are auto-generated for the corners to blend together smoothly. Use what best works for you. You can create your own artwork for any of these tiles. To do this, either drag a pattern brush off of the brush's panel or create your own design. When using a pattern brush, the artwork is most likely grouped together. So use the Ungroup command found on the Object menu to make selecting individual objects easier. You may need to apply the Ungroup command several times until it's no longer selectable. Delete or make changes to the existing artwork. Here, I'm going to make some simple color changes to some of the artwork. Once done editing, drag the artwork onto the Swatches panel, which you can access from the Window menu. This will make our artwork accessible when we update the existing pattern brush. Now, when I click on a tile menu in the pattern brush settings, I can choose my own artwork. The final type of brush to look at are bristle brushes. You can find those on the Brush Menus library by selecting Bristle Brush. This type of brush mimics the look of real-world brushes to give artwork a painterly look. These are great brushes to use if you have a drawing tablet. Let's now focus on how to create a custom brush library you can use in other documents. This all starts with the Brushes panel. Make sure the brushes you want in a library are all visible from this panel. Select and delete the brushes you don't want. You may be prompted to expand strokes or remove them if a brush you're deleting is actively being used on paths. Expand will convert the applied brush to a regular vector object. It will no longer be a brush. If there's a brush you don't want that you can't delete, don't worry. It's a system brush and won't appear in your custom library. If everything looks good with your collection of brushes, select the library icon at the lower left of the panel and choose Save Brushes. Be sure to give your library a meaningful name. Illustrator will ask you where you want to save this library. In most situations, stick with where it defaults you to, then click Save. Now you can access your newly created library by opening the Brush Libraries menu and choosing it from the User-Defined menu. Lastly, if you've downloaded or purchased brushes, you can install these by opening the Brush Libraries menu and selecting Other Library. Illustrator will then want to know where to find them on your computer. Locate them, then click Open. Brushes can add a great amount of detail and texture to artwork you create in Illustrator and are a great time saver. I encourage you to create your own or find ones to use from the web.